So first of all, welcome. Thank you all for being here. I know it's a busy couple of days, and we're getting to the end of day 2. So today's topic is all about next generation of SIM portability and SIM management. It's a standard called SGP.32. We don't want to bore you with a lot of letters and numbers. We want to talk to you about kind of what it is, what it means to the embedded community, what it means to designers and engineers, as well as what it means to folks that take product to market. So we want to be as practical and talk about use cases, as well as some of the other issues and opportunities that you might have if you deploy new technology in the connected IoT world and the cellular networks, and what this standard can bring to you. The best part about this panel is actually the panelists. We've assembled really 3 great experts in the topic, and they're going to each introduce themselves, tell a little bit about what they do in terms of SGP.32, and then we'll get into some questions and some dialogue. We will have the opportunity, if somebody's got a burning question, raise your hand, we'll figure out how to get it asked. But I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you take something away from it. So with that, Peter, why don't you introduce yourself, and we'll just go down the line.
Yeah, so good afternoon. My name is Peter Gaspar. I work for the company called A1. The A1 is the company that brings the Mannerschnitten to the embedded world. So you probably have a few of them. So we are a sister company of the A1 Telecom in Austria. We concentrate on the so-called new technologies. We build the solutions for the group, for the A1 group, in the area of the cloud, in the area of the IoT and the IoT connectivity, and the security solutions. So myself, I work I'm heading the architecture team, concentrating on the managed connectivity and on the IoT solutions. So with my IoT solutions hat, where we are helping our customers to bring up the IoT solutions, I'm really thrilled about the SGP.32. I really bring a lot of enthusiasm for that. With my head of the managed connectivity, and I work with the cellular connectivity since the last millennium already, I bring a bit of a skepticism as well. So that's what I'm here to discuss.
Great.
Thanks, Peter. I'm Cyril Proye. I'm working for Thales, 2 years now only. Thales is a global leader company, technological company, with different pillars, I would say. I'm part of the cybersecurity and digital identity. Typically, we are eSIM vendor in that case, where we pioneer the new technology SGP.32. We already have strong presence in the eSIM that you know already in the consumer industry, in your smartphone, with different protocols and standards. Now we pioneer this new standard called SGP.32 with pre-standard and already some deployment on the field. So we are a SIM vendor, ranked often number 1 or pace setter by the analysts in the industry, plus the services that we want to provide around the eSIM, not only the hardware, but also for the connectivity management and the security management, since we can do both with this approach. And on my side, I'm in charge of the marketing, fully dedicated in the IoT for the CES department.
Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, then I go on. So my name is Marc Sauter. I work for Vodafone IoT. Prior to Vodafone, I used to work for Centurion. You can see the booth over there. At Vodafone IoT, I have the pleasure to lead product management and marketing on a global level. And basically with Vodafone IoT, we connect more than 250 million devices out there globally, anywhere, anytime. Many of them have eSIM capability. We launched actually eSIM more than 10 years ago with the previous standard SGP.02. Recently, we also launched SGP.32. Also have several devices on there that we connect globally. And just in 2025, we also launched SGP.32, where we also have initial customers already using it. So overall, we have experience of more than 10 years with eSIM overall, starting very early with the first standard, and we have millions of devices out there using eSIM. Our largest customers, they have about more than 20 million connections on our platform, but we also have customers that only have a few devices on our platform.
Okay, great. So just as maybe a show of hands, how many people are aware of the eSIM and the SGP.32 standard as it stands? Who's here to learn, or who's here? Okay. So we got a couple of ringers in the middle there. All right, so with that as a baseline, Marc, I'd love for you to start out with the use cases. What are the use cases or the verticals that are maybe most applicable to SGP.32 implementation, and why?
Yeah. So look, let's just take a step back, and with SGP.02, it were primarily the automotive industry that used eSIM technology, and there were early adopters, and I think they were still one of the early adopters also of SGP.32. So automotives, we work with the large automotive OEMs, whether that's Mercedes or Hyundai or Ford. They all have one way or the other an eSIM embedded in their cars. The main reason for that is because they have global deployments. They only want to have a single stock keeping unit. That they want to avoid having different versions of the product. And now specifically recently, some of the markets, like in Brazil, for example, or also in the Middle East, like in Saudi Arabia or the UAE, they don't allow permanent roaming, so you need to localize the SIM basically, right? And so that's one of the main use cases for the automotive industry, and that's also the case then for medical device manufacturers, or also more generally speaking, asset tracking companies that just want to roll out their devices globally and want to have a single stock keeping unit. So that's what we see as the main use case at the moment.
Okay. So Cyril, let's jump to you. The mic's coming back this way anyway. Are there specific device types that benefit the most, and where might a traditional SIM still be a good solution?
I will make the echo of what Marc just saying. The first vertical, the first segment where we see this eSIM deployment, where it's mission critical. So typically, one of the most mature one outside of course, there's automotive market, the utility and energy. So typically, smart meters. There's a huge demand today on our side and on the field. From the distributor system operator, from water or for electricity, so smart meter, gateway, concentrators, high power voltage sensors, also not only the meters, so meters for people, but also for their own operations. What we can mention also, another vertical that popping up is for the mobile payment point of sales, the MPOS. It's not for their operation. The payment service provider, they have to secure the transaction to the merchant. If they lose the connectivity, if the terminal of payment lose the connectivity, they lose the transaction. Typically, they lose revenue. They will have churn with their merchant. So having to secure this connectivity is key, is still mission critical for them. And there is a huge demand here to embark the eSIM in this kind of devices. Also for security system, alarm, camera, you must have this business continuity. You must have this continuity of connectivity. This is the core of the service provider in their offer. So this is the main trend that we see today for our demands. Where do we still see, let's say, traditional SIM cards? Fred, I would take one example. There's no one technology fits all, and there's super interesting use case in Spain. I don't know if you're aware about this, if you have seen this. In Spain, this is under regulation. For all the cars, they need to have a secure alarm in their car. They have to be equipped with a device, a beacon. The project is called V16 beacon. You can check on Google. It's mandatory, it's under regulation. So all the car we have some lights in case of emergency. They stop the car, they put the light on the car, and that we call directly, immediately, the security and stuff. It is embarked with cellular connectivity. They don't need to have an eSIM. They don't need to have a eSIM. They need to have a small piece of plastic embedded in this, with a profile, different profiles in there, because they have one country and that's enough, and that fits perfectly the demand. So there's still high demand of traditional SIM for IoT, for industrial grade, I would say. This market is still growing, and that's still interesting to see on the field.
Okay. So a product that has maybe one SKU, but it's really only for one market.
Yes, correct.
Kind of a good summary of that.
Yes, you're right.
Okay. Well, Peter, what operational benefits is there if you're an OEM? What operational benefits might you see if you're using SGP.32? And typically it's not if you're in one SKU, one country, right? We just kind of eliminated that. So if you have a global deployment, talk about what you see customers benefiting from.
Yeah, so I think the benefits, and again, with my IoT solution hat, now the benefits are in me producing first and thinking about the connectivity later. So I don't need to know at the time of the manufacturing where my device is going to be. So I can later in the field decide which connectivity provider I will use for the particular device, so down to the last device. And this is interesting for the use cases where you have a consumer maybe at the end, so a lawn mowers or a pet trackers, where you are selling them through the Amazon, and basically you only decide when they first connect in the country which connectivity you will provide to that particular device. So, and with this you can address the problems with the permanent roaming in some of the countries where this is prohibited. So you can choose the connectivity when it enters the country to the right provider, which is in the country. Or you can decide based on the region. Maybe you have a better contract with the mobile operators in one region and with a different operator in the different region. So in Asia Pac, you would use a different connectivity provider as an IoT solution manufacturer than you use in the Americas. Yeah, so I think this is the biggest operational change for the IoT solutions, that you can decide really later, only when the device is out in the field, what connectivity you will use. You're not restricted to choose that during the manufacturing.
Okay. So I guess if you please comment on that. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? And maybe it's also a little bit a controversial view, but I hope that also makes this panel more interesting. For sure, right, the industry with SGP.32, it's a fantastic achievement, right? It's great technology, it simplifies things a lot, it's highly standardized, latest security aspects are taken into consideration. But I think we also need to, look behind the hype and the marketing, story that's there, because for sure, with a traditional SIM card, I mean, for example, probably in A1 it's the same thing, right? We cover almost 200 countries, 800 networks, right? And with that SIM, you can roam everywhere. And if you roam, and that's very important for majority of our customers, right? Then they also have access to not only one network in the country, they have access to 3 or 4 networks in the country, right? So for example, our IoT SIM in Germany gives you access not only to the Vodafone network, of course that's a preferred one, but also as a backup you have Deutsche Telekom and Telefonica O2. And that's a huge advantage that you have, right? If you localize the SIM, you lose that capability. Then also what you need to take into account is that an eSIM, right, over total cost of ownership is sometimes 10 times more expensive than an old normal SIM, right? It starts with the hardware. So in EUICC, the SIM is more expensive than a normal SIM because you need a little bit more memory, blah, 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 right? And then you also need the backend system, the EIM, which is more or less, you can consider the EIM as your steering wheel, right? Where you then say, okay, the EIM tells you I want to know switch, right? So the EIM, typically, you know, suppliers charge you a monthly fee for that. So that all adds up to the cost. And you really need to think, is it worth to pay more money to have a higher total cost of ownership for the benefits that you get? So it's really important to take that into account. And then the other thing is, many of our customers, they really appreciate and value that they have one supplier for connectivity in 30, 40, 50 countries, right? It's one contract, one invoice, one help desk, et cetera, right? So if you then start using a technology like SGP.32 to switch from one vendor to another, right, then you need to have a contract with that mobile network operator. You need to integrate with their platform. You need to have then a different help desk. You need to get a second invoice. I mean, many of our customers don't want that, right? They want to have the simplicity. And therefore, for example, what we do, we have certain products that come with SGP.32 for customers, for example, that need, I mean, Mercedes and Hyundai, for example, right? And that's in the public domain, so therefore I'm happy to talk about it, right? But they wanted to have connectivity for their cars in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and in the United Emirates. And in those markets, permanent roaming is not possible from a regulatory perspective. So therefore, with our global roaming SIM, yeah, it's not allowed. So therefore, we use SGP to transform from the global SIM into a local SIM on Mobily or Etisalat to be compliant with that local law. So, and that makes a lot of sense then, because then Mercedes and Hyundai, they don't need to have different versions for the car that goes into Europe and the other car that goes into Saudi Arabia. They can just produce one connectivity box. Sorry.
No, you're good. So it's not all peaches and cream, right? It's not all lovely. There are some efforts and some contractual obligations and some other operational things. So it sounds like if there's a compliance issue, right? No permanent roaming. Another example is data sovereignty. You have to be in my country. Utilities is maybe a good example. Critical infrastructure. You can't leave the border with the transport or the data or the app. And then it's worth those contracts. You're obligated. So if I'm a customer now and I'm building something and I want to be ready for that environment, what does Thales tell you to do?
Good question. Let's say the most important one we say is to validate the entire ecosystem of the device. How the eSIM will discuss with the cellular module, how it will discuss with the profile of the operators, how it will discuss with the platform, the EIM that Marc mentioned, the eSIM IoT manager. We must validate everything. That's the first key. We have at Thales, I can mention this, we have a full dedicated team end-to-end testing to validate the entire ecosystem. Saying this in concrete words, there are two parts. First, of course, the first one will be the hardware. How do you integrate the component in your PCB, in your motherboard? There are different form factors of eSIM with a trend of miniaturization, different, let's say, MFF2, MFF3, MFF4, different form factors that we can mention. And then the second part, which is the software part. So typically, again, the new component coming from the SGP.32 under standard is the EIM that we mentioned. Often developed and proposed by the eSIM vendor or can be developed in-house. There are also some the LPA on the device, so the IoT profile assistance that could be embedded into the eSIM IPAE or into the device developed in the firmware by the OEM. And what about the initial connectivity? The first connectivity that you will need to put in your device to be sure that you will grab the operational connectivity later, so different aspect possibilities at the end, but at least you need to think about this one. And last but not least, the security part. We are used to say we design we want to integrate the security by design, right? Not to put the security after, as soon as you already started and check later how does it work. You need to integrate this. That's the beauty somewhere of the cellular connectivity with the SIM and eSIM that embark a secure element. An eSIM is a secure element, and then that can be is a root of trust, and that can be the starting point for the security part. Protect the identity of the device, protect the certificate, the PKI, you can manage the entire life cycle of the device and the security with some applet also on top. So security by design, I would say, as an approach, not only the connectivity part.
Okay. So Peter, to keep it controversial,
Yeah.
let's say I don't want to get locked in by this guy, right? What's the SIM lock-in challenge and what an OEM might think is an advantage? But again, Marc did say, hey, there are some complexities. If you want this flexibility,
Right.
you got to do contracts. From your perspective, how do you address a customer that's still got questions or concerns about that? And you kind of touched on who's your bootstrap
Right.
profile. You know, is that kind of the first door you go in, and is that a marketing advantage and a retention advantage? Talk about that in general.
No, so to keep it controversial, yeah. So I really I'm a big fan, even as a connectivity provider, I'm a big fan of the eSIM because it gives me as an operator a channel to the customer to support him more. So if he has a problem with a SIM card, yeah, I can somehow still. The customer doesn't have to know he has an eSIM, but I have a channel how I can maybe better support. The price, you are right. Yeah, the hardware is more expensive, not too much. What is expensive are the frequent changes. So if you really go around and you change the profile frequently, you activate, deactivate, upload the profile, this comes with a cost. We are trying to negotiate with our vendors that there is no cost for a passive SIM. So the SIM that has not contacted the EIM should not be charged for. So for me, I'm a big fan of having the eSIM, even if the customer doesn't know he has an eSIM. But you're right, the lock-in is moving somewhere else because the customer is now not locked into the first profile that is on the SIM card. He can change. But on the other hand, I think we have seen that with SGP.32 already. I don't think anybody has ever changed a provider, even if there was a possibility to do that. Yeah, so porting out, we haven't seen a massive changes there because there are other things that lock in the customer, and that's the connectivity contract, that's the single bill, as you said. There is all this hustle to manage when do I change to which operator, and that's why I deliberately at the beginning avoided to say that you choose your local provider. Yeah? You may have the providers for the regions, big regions, as I said, APAC, Europe, Americas, but you will probably not go down to each country and have a contract there. So you have this lock-in through the connectivity contract, which you have, and even if you can change maybe your providers because you use some connectivity broker, then you have a locked into your connectivity broker. So you will not avoid so you will not gain a full freedom for free. Yeah? So there is always a price to be paid, even with the eSIM, to manage all of these complexities there.
Let me just say, look, that there's no misunderstanding. I mean, myself, but also in Vodafone IoT, we endorse and support SGP.32, right? Because we think it's a great technology. But all I wanted to say is that for the customer, it's important that you go to a trusted partner with experience and expertise. Then you work with that partner on your use case, what you want to achieve, you know, the problem that you want to solve. And then it could be that you go for a traditional SIM card or you go with an eSIM, right, with SGP, whatever. But you need to really, you know, think through and say, okay, because there is no one size fits all, and there is also no free lunch. So for example, yes, there is the vendor lock-in, but therefore I think it's important that you select from a lot of these IoT use cases are out there for 10, 15 years, and obviously you want to avoid after 10 years go out and change the SIM card, right? Because that costs a lot of money, is completely unacceptable. So therefore, it's important that you select an IoT connectivity provider that you trust will be there in 10, 15 years and will not go out of business. An IoT connectivity provider who has focus on IoT and is not doing it, next to many other things. And then, I mean, if you then have a concern that, that the connectivity provider is increasing pricing or something like that, or is not reducing prices, that then you could, for example, contractually put a clause into the contract where you say, hey, after a certain period of time, I would like to have a price benchmark or something like that. I mean, that's all feasible. So I just want to say, in order to solve a certain problem, it might not be the technology. There might be other means to solve it. Yeah, but after all, SGP.32, great thing, right? We're all happy that we have it because it opens up new use cases, new markets. I think it's a good thing to do, but yeah.
Okay, you can remain on the panel. So the other thing to think about is interesting. So let me give some perspective. So as IoT launch, and then I have another business which does data and device management. So I deal with a lot of customers that work globally, from maritime transit, container management, to metering companies. And when I hear them talk about eSIM and SGP.32, there's sometimes a misconception that it's going to maybe be less expensive and it's going to be easier. And when you think about something like a container transit around the world, clearly you're not anywhere long enough transmitting enough data, incurring enough costs where doing anything around SGP.32 makes sense. It's just hard and expensive, and you use it could be 10 times the operational. Yeah, if you're in that kind of a mode, that would be terrible. Yet, maybe a water meter company that wants to build one SKU, but they ship into 8, 10, 12 different geographies. For them, the manufacturing simplicity is quite tremendous, and they have usually a high volume of units, and they can afford to deal with the contract of a local provider. They might have the country sovereign data issues as well. So it really is a technology that we can't get over enamored with what it can do. It's really where will you use it and why.
And also there are customers that use it as an insurance, right? Think about your fire insurance for your house, right? So you hope that you never need that because there is no fire. But they say, hey, and also the insurance, costs some money to protect your assets, and that's also this thing, right? They say, okay, for me the insurance, it's worth it. I put a little bit more money on the table, but then I have the flexibility if the thing hits the fan, right? To have then some options.
Well, I think Keith said it when he welcomed us in these kind of strange and challenging times. Policies change. Data sovereignty rules can change. I'm from America. Tariffs have changed, right? So rules change. And to your point, the insurance policy to have the flexibility with your providers and your localization operators, I think, is indeed key. Some final topics from you guys, and then I really would like to see if there's any questions from the audience.
Maybe I will just mention one more use case that we see also locally in the countries where we talk about so-called a resilient SIM, where you can have two profiles on the same SIM card, which actually you have a primary one, and if you don't get the connectivity because of either you don't have a signal or the whole network is down, so for some critical use cases, you can then switch to the second profile from a completely different operator or from a completely different operator from the same group, as we would do that, where you have a resilient or a completely redundant infrastructure behind that, and you have a security that this will work even if the first network is down. Yeah. So you have a full redundancy which you can use for the critical applications. That's one of the applications where SGP.32 has standardized this process of switching on the edge to the other operator if there is a connectivity issue.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the good old days, you had 2 SIM sockets, right, I mean, you take space, cost, everything else. Cyril, you have anything you would like to say about it before we open it up to the audience?
Just to make echo of what Peter is saying, we have seen in the US a trend for the utility. We are mentioning in mission critical and critical infrastructure. The utility in the US, they are very used to implement private network in their areas, and we demonstrated with the support of local carriers and system integrators there that we can use, thanks to the SGP.32, have a backup security. You can imagine an issue with your private network shut down and then come back to the public network to have a business continuity, retrieve the data, send the data is under regulation, so they have to retrieve the data and to send the data, the utility for their own operation, but also for people. And this SGP.32 gives this flexibility and this possibility for the utility, and then come back later as soon as it's work over to the private network. So that was just to make echo of what Peter is saying.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So you're kind of working in an air-gapped network, but if you need to do updates, business continuity, life cycle management, you might want to connect to the outside to do that, but then go back into kind of the private 5G space. Interesting.
I mean, maybe just to add to that, and last week, Mobile World Congress, one of the mostly talked topics at Mobile World Congress was satellite, right? If we talk about mission critical and redundancy, I mean, if you combine cellular with satellite, you have the ultimate redundancy, right? Because that's also what we see, right? In certain use cases, they combine cellular with satellite. If something's wrong with cellular for whatever reason, we still have satellite connection.
Correct. Very good. So again, I think the satellite, let's talk about NTN for a minute. There are some satellite companies that are now thinking about doing, kind of the satellite primary model is partner with the carrier and backhaul on the carrier network. There's some opportunities for some satellite companies that I know are in process where they'll have their own RAN and core. So it's going to be a completely unique path for mission critical infrastructure. And I think that's a very interesting model where you need to have 2 profiles and be able to switch back and forth. So there are indeed lots of things to think about. From a manufacturing point of view.
So just
good.
To the satellite topic, it's difficult for me to talk about it because we in Austria have a very good coverage. So I think the Germans could maybe more relate to the satellite backup.
Okay.
It was just joking.
You want to make a joke too? No, I think it's interesting, and I think the other point that we all really need to make is there's the hype. IoT has been always chasing the next hype, right? We change networks, we have cool new things. SGP.32 isn't necessarily a reason to slow down a design or speed up a design. It's another way of doing some of the same old stuff. Roaming solves most everything. This is a different way to solve that problem with a different set of complexities, a different set of economics, a different set of compliance, potentially some enhanced security, right, which is great, but it's not the big shiny object that makes IoT perfectly easy for everybody, for every use case. I think that's a very fair thing to leave the audience with. And with that, I would like to thank you guys for joining the panel. I'd like to thank the audience. Hopefully we've given you something to think about, or if you've got questions following, please don't hesitate to find one of us as we wander the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.